This film revolves around some sort of like magical plant. Interpret this how you want. What is the most magical plant flower that you've ever found?
Oh wow. We had this. This is. I mean, I'm assuming this is actually a drug question. We had this.
Hypothetically.
We.
Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass, and today I'm joined by Philip Gelatt and Morgan King, the co-writers and co-directors of The Spine of Night, which is coming to theaters, on demand, and digital on October 29th, 2021. We're going to talk to them in just a second, but first, let's check out the trailer, and while you're watching, if you could like and subscribe to this channel, that would be fantastic. I'll spend a lot. Thank you.
There are so many things that man cannot know. The bloom is the last light of the gods.
The sacred bloom traveled, and my dreams traveled with it.
I will not let you do this!
This night is not yet done.
Hey Philip.
Hello, how are you?
Hey Morgan.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, going well. How are you?
Good. Good.
All right, let's see. That's the kind of stills I expected to see in your all's room. So it checks out. Everything checks out.
We debated putting up green screens, but then I was like, "Screw it!" So you get to see the whole nerdy background.
It's perfect. It fits very well. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for joining me. This is Philip Gelatt and Morgan King, the co-writers and co-directors of The Spine of Night, which is coming to theaters and digital on October 29th, 2021. So I will say I do not watch trailers and try not to read about anything before I watch it. And then I turned this on and I was like, oh, this is a very different film than I kind of thought it would be. So, I mean, clearly you're crazy to take on this project, but what was the inspiration to do this? I know it took 7 years, which is an insane amount of time for any project, and let alone, this project of love. So I guess what was your inspiration for this, and what got you started?
I had been wanting to get back into making film after, the decade after school. I didn't really keep up with it. And then when I wanted to get back to that, I thought about what was the thing in the world that I wanted to see that didn't exist anymore. And I grew up on, the late 70s and early 80s, Ralph Bakshi and heavy metal. And it was like a big, as big of a spike into the pop culture as rotoscoping has ever had. Mm-hmm. So making rotoscope fantasy stories in my Philadelphia living room seemed like a great thing to do to get started. And I sort of just, tried to reverse engineer Bakshi's look from Fire and Ice, if anyone remembers that one. And, just started working on shorts until eventually I did one called Exordium, which made its way over to Phil.
Yeah, so I saw Exordium, Morgan short film, and was just immediately in love with it in terms of there are a lot of subgenres of fantasy out there, but there aren't a lot of them that we see on screen, really. Like sort of what I would describe as Tolkienism is sort of the one that we mostly associate with fantasy, at least since the Peter Jackson films. And then, there's also Game of Thrones, but those are sort of like the two flavors of genre of fantasy that we see on screen. Exordium and Spine of Night are a different flavor entirely. I don't even know that I can properly describe the subgenre, but I knew when I saw Exordium that it was like more akin to, I don't know, like the sword and sorcery Conan the Barbarian stuff, but with like a heavy load of like 1970s style outsider surrealism, which is all things that I love, especially when they're put together. So I loved the short film and reached out to Morgan and was like, hey, let's figure out how to make something together. And very quickly that idea became, Morgan had these other ideas of stories that could be set in the world of the short film. So we took those, crammed them together into this mega narrative. I believe the first treatment Morgan wrote was called the Megazord treatment. Yep. That's right. And then we took it from there, and it was quite a journey. But yeah, that's how it started.
I love that you bring. I mean, obviously, you bring up the Bakshi animated films. I actually didn't remember. Like, I watched the Lord of the Rings films when I was a kid. The Hobbit, and then I think basically did the Frodo with the Nine Fingers was this other one. And I watched those as a kid, and I just kind of forgotten about them. Like, I watched those so many times because it was, like you said, it's so unique. It's deals with genres that maybe don't necessarily blend together all the time. And so, seeing this now and thinking about that, this does really evoke that style.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it was certainly what we're going for. I've got over here the pointing to the original stills or keyframes from it. It's where the Nazgul are stabbing the bed with all the hobbits in it at the end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it came to me really early because my mom worked at the library when I was a kid, and it was back when you had to like rent the town VCR because you couldn't just buy them. And the funding rules for the libraries, they could only get movies that were based on books. So Bakshi's Lord of the Rings slipped in under the radar with a lot of very boring BBC adaptations. so I watched it just over and over again as a kid.
Yeah, that was, you had to like watch it and then rewind and watch it and rewind, and that was an ordeal. So you described the original treatment as like a Megazord type treatment. Is that because this film does kind of have distinct, I don't know, arcs or chapters would be one way to describe it. So were these stories that were all loosely based in this world that you kind of melded together, or did you just kind of have these weird stories and then you kind of added some glue to put the concepts together? How did that come about?
Well, we always knew I mean, I think from very early on, we sort of had two main ideas. Where like, what if the the heavy metal film, which sort of has the Lochnar, the green orb, that sort of loosely ties things together, and often it's like shoehorned in from the original stories they were adapting. But like, what if we had a thematic through line like that was actually central to the story we were telling, rather than sort of secondary? Mm-hmm. So that was a key point. And then there's this amazing 70s sci-fi book called A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr., which has this very similar structure where you'll see the echoes of a story jump through, like between chapters it's 100 years, and then 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. Like, it takes these huge time jumps, and I always just love the structure where you're seeing just like windows into time over like a cosmic or geologic scale that you don't see in storytelling very often.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And that fits exactly right. So the other thing I wanted to ask, there's clearly a lot of world building in this universe. So, I mean, these are based on your stories. I assume are there more stories that kind of flesh out some of the characters and entities that are involved in here? Is there more? How much background did you do before kind of picking these to be the figureheads for your world?
I mean, I think one thing we really wanted to do with that was to give, I don't want to say we didn't have that, because it all sort of lives in your head as you're creating the characters and winnowing out exactly how you're going to frame them. We certainly had like a lot more backstory and side story for some of the characters in the early drafts. But I've always liked, I was old enough to see Star Wars before there was a gigantic extended universe for it. So there was this time when like you didn't know where anyone came from. Like, you didn't even know exactly what the rebels were, just rebelling against evil. Like, you didn't have this, or you didn't know who the people in the cantina were. Like, you didn't know who Jabba the Hutt was. You'd never seen any of them. So you were so free to imagine all the world beyond the borders of the film in a way where it hadn't been filled in yet. So I think we wanted to write it in a style that would promote the audience interaction and imagination with what else could be on the fringes that we're not seeing. I mean, to make the world much bigger than the world we're actually showing.
Yeah, I mean, I have I'm 100%, Morgan and I are entirely simpatico on that issue. Like, I don't, just take another Star Wars example. Like, Boba Fett was never cooler than he was when he was just a bounty hunter with a cool looking helmet and a jetpack, and you had to sit as a kid and think about what else has Boba Fett done. And every piece of canon that they have layered onto that character, or any character, has only, to my mind, served to make it less interesting and less enticing as a viewer. So I keep rather pretentiously referring to the movie or our philosophy as anti-canon. Like, we want to give the viewers like room to imagine in our world, and like give them interesting characters and enticing details that they can and hopefully will like sort of lean forward and think about it and have an opportunity to really like imagine themselves into the world, if you will. So yeah,
definitely. And I like that you brought up, the like Tolkien storytelling where he like built an entire world and then had to tell a story in that. And then you've got like the Star Wars where you tell an interesting story and then the world builds around it. So I kind of like those two as the two nerd bookends of the world building philosophy. And speaking of nerd bookends, I love the cast here because when I looked at the cast, every single one. I'm like, yeah, that's probably someone that would be into some sort of weird D&D nerd film. Like every single person. So how did you get them, to agree to this mad project of yours? And I guess at what level of the 7 years did you get them involved? Seems like maybe some were involved earlier and then some were involved later. But how did you throw together this cast?
So you kind of answered the question in your question, right? Which is that like we approached. You always want to be curatorial with who you approach for casting, but in this particular case, we wanted to approach actors who we figured would be into it, right? So Joe Manganiello being the most obvious one, like his love of D&D and his love of dark fantasy stuff is very well known. So when we approached him, it felt like it wasn't obvious that he was going to take it, but we felt we had a pretty good shot. And the same applies to Patton. It applies to Lucy. I mean, she's not a nerd herself, I don't think, but she clearly has existed in this genre milieu long enough that she's been a
nerd icon for a very long time.
She's been a nerd icon for a very long time, and she's also and I say this with all love in my heart, like as charmingly crazy as you would want her to be. So when she saw the footage, she was immediately like, yes, I want to do this. And then like her lawyer was like, don't take this role because of the way the character is drawn. And she was like, no, like that's absolutely why I'm taking it, because it's so out there and it's so different than the way that she has been in the genre before, or even that the genre is normally done. So it really was, again, so we really tried to approach nerds and nerd adjacent people. The only, and most of them, to the second part of your question, we brought on late in the process so we could show them the animation and show them like what the movie was going to be, instead of just saying, here's our crazy script, come do it. Much easier to sign on after you have a good sense of how the animation is going to look. Very lucky to have all of them. That's all so talented.
Now, the only real exception to that was Betty Gabriel came on at the very beginning. She was the only one of our headline cast that we also were able to shoot the original live action reference footage with. So yeah.
She's not a nerd, sadly for her, because we tried to make her one, but she was like, yeah, I don't know what this, I don't know what, I love it, but I don't get it. So,
you always have to have one cool person, right? One figurehead. And I love Betty Gabriel in it, because to your point, I was watching, I was like, she looks really familiar. And I like went and like looked up, what I'd seen her in. I was like, oh, that is totally her. And it was nice to have that little touch there, because I totally recognize her. She has a very distinct look and it fit perfectly.
Yeah, and she's so talented. Anything that she's in, I recommend searching out just for her. I watched a movie she's in, Adopt a Highway, with Ethan Hawke. I'd never heard of. It's just like a little indie drama. She's in it for maybe 3 scenes, but those are the best 3 scenes in the movie. She's great. Yeah.
There you go. So watch that as well.
Yeah.
and so we mentioned a couple times, 7 years to make this. I mean, that's like stop motion animation levels of time. What was it? Just the love? Was it, what kept you going for all this time and everything that I imagine that you had to go through to get this film made?
I think obsession, I guess, maybe is the answer.
Obsession and insanity.
Yeah, once you're...
That's filmmaking in a nutshell right there, right?
It definitely took longer than we'd initially anticipated. The Exordium short film took 10 months to draw 8 minutes, and I scaled up from that. But then it turns out that drawing 3 characters on screen takes 3 times as long as 1 character, which the short film mostly was. So which seems obvious in retrospect, but it just became a really big time sink. Which and the style itself is a notoriously labor-intensive style. So my wife was really patient with me. I watched a lot of movies on my other monitor, but it was pretty much all day, every day for the entire 7 years. So it was a real. It had to be a labor of love or madness, because it's the only way we could get it done.
And now that it's done, I imagine you're just going to jump right back in and tell some more stories in this beautiful hand animated style in like 7 more years. Are there more stories in maybe other media, maybe comic books or other types of storytelling that might come out with around this film?
Well, we certainly, you have so much time for your mind to wander, and while you're making something for this long, and you're living with these characters for so long in the world, to such a deep level, that we certainly have an extensive amount of notes and outlines and sketches and characters that could live here in this world if the opportunity arose. I've wanted to do like a black and white, like magazine size, like Savage Sword of Conan thing, like from the mid '80s, which I had a big stack of those growing up. I think that'd be really fun to do, like an old black and white fantasy magazine. If if the audience is there and the demand is, exists, I think we will jump back in and make more. Hopefully with a bigger team and some more modern efficiencies to the animation.
Yeah, but maybe I'll lose the love though. I know we have a very limited amount of time. I just want to get a couple really quick questions. I call them lightning round questions. They're just short, lightweight questions that kind of relate to the film. I want to see how your experiences match onto the film. I'm just going to pick a couple because I know we're running out. So in Dungeons and Dragons, what class are you?
Oh, my last one, I played a paladin.
Thief.
All right, I like that. Lawful and probably chaotic. Perfect. So there's all sorts of weapons in this film. There's axes, swords, magic, even like a broken stick. What would your go-to weapon be?
Oh, an axe for sure. I feel like it's just inherently intimidating in a way where one hit and you're done.
Like a nice super curved dagger.
There we go. All right. And how many times do you play Dragon's Lair? Because that's what I was thinking when I was watching this film the first time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You go first. I was so mad and frustrated at it as a kid. I think it was that game. But as a whenever I could get it on an emulator and could just reload all my failures, I definitely played it through. But
I lost so much money at the arcade. I'm gonna say, from a kid perspective, so much money. It was probably like $20 I spent playing that and never made it past like the fourth interaction or something. Yeah.
And the last question: this film revolves around some sort of like magical plant. Interpret this how you want. What is the most magical plant, flower that you've ever found?
Oh wow. We had this is, I'm assuming this is actually a drug question. We had this we had these, I'd never even seen them before, like these philosopher's stone mushrooms. They're like these big, the size of a rock, were profound. It was a profound experience.
Hypothetically, yes.
Hypothetically.
I don't know how to answer that question.
That's fine. All right, so this is the great sports and wonderful animators, Philip Gelatt and Morgan King, the co-directors and co-writers of The Spine of Night, which is coming to theaters, digital, and on demand on October 29th, 2021. Thank you so much for your time, and definitely check it out. It is unique. You will not find anything else like this, I can guarantee you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Take care. That was Philip Gelatt and Morgan King, the co-writers and directors of The Spine of Night, which is coming to theaters, digital, and on demand on October 29th, 2021. It's an old school style animation. Think like the Lord of the Rings from the 1970s, and it's a very unique type of film that you don't really get these days. If you like this interview, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you, including my other reviews, interviews, unboxing videos, and my weekly recommendations. Thank you.